we have to entertain the idea that there were powerful secret societies and groups that didn't want us walking down that road.
Who do you think are the most notorious of those?
Well, I mean, let's give you an example. I think Constantine was a really bad guy. Constantine he took the Roman Empire, turned it into the Byzantine Holy Roman Empire, and that's where we have the basis for the Old Testament. It's called the Council of Nicaea. Yeah. This is where the Council of Nicaea occurred, where certain things were kept and certain things were kept out, and things were decided, and that's when the Council of Nicaea in that time period of history is when ancient history was determined. Did you know that?
So Council of Nicaea comes up a lot on this podcast.
Yeah.
And I've had different people from different angles, everything from you to Wes Huff, talking about this in different ways. I did not buy all of Wes's argument on the Council of Nicaea. I'll say that. Does that mean, though, that everything was like written down about Christianity then, like the Da Vinci Code would try to say? Not necessarily. But do I think that the history, and I would say this about any ancient text or anything we're studying, do I think the history is perfectly reported in the Christian religion? No. I don't think it's perfectly reported in Islam. I don't think it's perfectly reported in Judaism. I don't think it's perfectly reported in stuff you could find from the Library of Ashurbanipal. Like, nothing is going to be perfect, but where can we land on the idea of like, ooh, this is in the right direction? I think that's why we have these arguments. But yes, if you want to explain more about the Council of Nicaea, I'm all ears, because it's a very fascinating thing, considering that prior to this, I think it started in like 313 AD, and maybe ran to like, there were things still going on in 325 or whatever. But prior to this, Christianity had effectively been illegal within the Roman Empire. And now you had an emperor saying, like, not only are we going to legalize it, it's a growing portion of people, so we want to get out in front of this and adopt it for our own.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert on that area. I don't want to claim to be. But what I do study is how that time period, a lot of things were established, we'll say.
Like what?
Like history. The narrative of history, Herodotus started that, but it became woven into an accepted teaching through the Roman time period of, well, how old is human civilization? When did it begin?
Yeah.
That whole time period was established. And once it became established, it hasn't budged since then. We have the same history that we've essentially been teaching for like 2,000 years.
Yeah, which I think is problematic, because we see, I mean, you've presented some evidence yourself today just on things you're looking at, but we see so much evidence of these things when we start talking about the Younger Dryas and things that could have existed before that, where there is, even within secular culture, where people maybe have nothing to do with religion or haven't really thought of it through that lens, there is a worldview that has been just built in for hundreds and hundreds of years that has them kind of biased towards not necessarily even creationism, but their timelines wrong.
Yeah, because it's been established. It's a lens. We were just talking about the lens of how you look at something, right? Our lens that we've been taught is that our civilization is 6,000 years old. It emerged in ancient Mesopotamia, and that nothing that existed before that was anything other than hunter-gatherers and then Neolithic humans. That's it. That's what we're told. Anything older than that. And yet we get places like Göbekli Tepe that are accurately dated with radiocarbon dating that are double that age. It doesn't make sense. Give me an example. We just had, within the last couple of years, all the announcements out of White Sands, New Mexico. Do you know about that? Where we've been told, and it's like, hey, this is an established narrative that humans got to the Americas through the Bering Strait, right? They got no earlier than 13,000 years ago. And that was how they got there, because it was frozen and they walked over and got here, except that we have established now with scientific evidence that White Sands footprints of humans are like 26,000 years old.
And how were we able to establish that?
They were able to uncover a layer that had been covered over. Remember we were talking about how if things are buried, they have a better chance of being able to date them?
Yes.
And so they were able to find different artifacts and different organic things within those buried areas near the footprints that have given them dating. And I'm not an expert on that, so I don't want to talk about that too much, other than I know that has been well established and fought by mainstream academics that does not want to accept that age, because that age is double the age that we're taught, that any kind of indigenous or hominid type of group was in the Americas. But it's the same thing that's echoed around the world, is that, we need to start looking at science as that the basis of science was intended upon,
Yes.
which is always being an objective observer of whatever evidence it is, and going along with that evidence, not having a predetermined conclusion that you stand by and you don't move from.
And this is the frustration. And we've talked about this in different levels on some of the podcasts we've done in the past, but, seeing this play out more and more and more over the last couple of years, especially, it's like given me more viewpoints into just how polarized this is and where there's wrong on both sides. As an example, we saw a debate, I guess like a year ago or whatever, with Graham Hancock and Flint Dibble.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, Flint is very much like a traditionalist, comes at it from the traditional lens. He's a smart guy, but I think there's things he's certainly closed-minded on. And like his personality is like a little bit Weasley for me, so it wasn't exactly like a sympathetic figure in that way. I'm someone who has enjoyed a lot of Graham Hancock's work in the past and think he has done some good work. That said, that was a really sad debate for me because it felt like Graham really got his ass kicked. And it wasn't so much that Flint kicked his ass. It was that Graham spent the entire time just, instead of really presenting evidence, ranting and raving against everything in quote-unquote mainstream archaeology, to the point that like he wasn't even open to something being right in there, which to me, the tragedy in this is that we're starting to incentivize creating the same sin from the other side, in this case, like the alternative side, that we were calling out on the mainstream side, which I agree with calling out. Like when you tell me that mainstream archaeologists and mainstream academia have been presented with some legitimate evidence, and I got to review it myself and whatever, for whatever that's worth, but they've been presented with some legitimate evidence that something in America could be twice the age that we once knew. I would want to know all about that. I would want to try to dig into that more. I would want to try to write papers on this. Fuck it. Peer review it. Do whatever you want. But they've created an ivory tower culture where they're like, that's just a bridge we don't want to go down. So we'll accept what we have because we think that could be right. We don't even want to explore whether or not the other thing could be right. That to me, I don't know how to, that'd be like the fucking $10 trillion question. I don't know how to solve that, but it seems to get worse with time. And it comes back to what we were talking about with the whole war culture thing, what I was saying, which is groupthink. Like it's very hard to take a group of people who are, maybe there's a small percentage of them who are pushing this line, but they hold some power and the other people just kind of fall into line. And I think that's what's happened maybe on both sides of the spectrum at this point.
Yeah, I think that it's a really sad thing to see science, mainstream science and archaeology be so closed-minded to evidence that's being presented. Whereas you were also pointing out that on the other side, sometimes our side can almost seem like frantic to try to prove our point, but not accepting that both sides are probably kind of right in their own, in some aspects, right?
Yes.
So it's not like we throw the baby out with the bathwater.
That's right.
We have to understand that there are aspects of traditional archaeology, and I get this all the time. Doesn't mean that everything's all wrong, right? Just because like NASA lied about some things doesn't mean all things in space are wrong.
Yes.
It's not an end all be all to that type of thinking. It's like, look, a lot of ancient history stuff is very valuable that we've uncovered and presented. I think the Akkadian, the Assyrian cultures are, for instance, and Babylonians are very well mapped out. But there's then the mysterious Sumerians that have evidence of being from like a different time period that, well, we should look at that more. Yeah. It's not like saying all of the Assyrian and Akkadian stuff's wrong, or all the Roman stuff's wrong, or all the Greek stuff is wrong. That's not really I think what we need to do is work together as objective researchers and scientists to bring back something that we once had, which is the wonder of the unknown and wanting to know more and being open-minded. Why is it so dangerous to have an open mind to ask questions?
It's so stupid, We were talking about my friend Luke Caverns, who I think you know, off camera earlier. And one of the reasons I really love Luke and his work is because he comes at it from both worlds. He was trained traditionally in academia under Dr. Ed Barnhart, no less. Fucking well-respected genius of that space. And he plays in a space where he talks with guys like you and talks with guys like Graham Hancock and is very interested in having that open mind and trying to figure shit out. He's also somebody who is willing to say the words, I don't know, or I was wrong about things. And I think that's part of the problem here. I think that's really what the nail on the head is. Instead of celebrating things like that, now, if someone's saying, I don't know, or I was wrong every 5 minutes about every single thing they find, I mean, they probably don't know much. But like when we villainize even possibly saying those terms or not falling into line, we are creating these barriers, and they're only going to get wider and wider and wider. And so it's really important that like guys can sit across from each other and find some space to say, all right, we can agree to disagree on this, maybe come back to that, but we can agree on this point. And I it's not like I haven't seen that before. I have seen that. But the things that get a lot more attention now are when you have the two sides screaming at each other, which I've been a part of too, like as a podcaster here. You've seen that before, but it's like, it's not really constructive.
No, it's not.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.